Hello and welcome to the 8-man Nightmare Mode Firebrand and Stormcaller boss fight guide. My name's Hayete, and today we'll be covering everything you need to know to successfully complete the second fight in the Explosive Conflict operation. For this encounter, you'll need to bring a standard composition of 2 tanks, 4 DPS, and 2 healers. Any class composition will be capable of beating this fight, however, having some ranged DPS in your group will give you a better chance of success if you fall into the encounter's enrage. For this video, I'll only be covering Nightmare-specific mechanics and strategies. If you need to brush up on the foundational mechanics and strategies, please head on over and watch our Hard Mode Firebrand and Stormcaller guide. That will cover everything you need to know prior to watching this video. Okay, let's jump right into the DPS requirements for the fight. This encounter maintains the hard mode enrage time of 6 minutes and 20 seconds. However, health totals have increased. Both tanks have an individual health of 4,342,190 HP. The Trandoshan shooter adds have an individual health of 105,858 HP. Evaluating the encounter under the same constraints as the hard mode analysis, we find the following. This is again assuming 0 damage is being done to the tanks during defensive systems. While this is highly unlikely, it does represent the worst case scenario and thus gives a better estimate as to the bare minimum DPS required to beat the fight at enrage. The total health for the encounter increased from hard mode to nightmare mode roughly 23%. This makes this fight one of the hardest you'll encounter in the game since you gain no extra time against the enrage and have to push out an additional 23% total DPS. So now let me go over the mechanic changes from hard mode to nightmare. Number 1. Overcharged jetpack. This is probably the most important change, and the one that will wipe your group the easiest if disregarded. Overcharged jetpack is a debuff gained by one add during defensive systems on both sides. This debuff causes the shooter to explode, dealing huge amounts of damage to anyone within 5 meters of the detonation. Number 2. Double Destruction. The debuff left on players gaining double destruction has been increased from 15 seconds to 35 seconds. This presents certain problems which will be discussed shortly during strategy explanation. Number 3. Defensive systems. More of a note to be aware of than a game-changing mechanic, defensive systems channel time has been reduced from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. This essentially means you'll have less time to react before the knockback. So those are the main differences between hard mode and nightmare mode. As far as strategy is concerned, we suggest you play the encounter utilizing the third strategy discussed in the hard mode guide. The main reason we suggest this strategy is that it pushes defensive systems quickly enough to ensure you only have to deal with 1 double destruction. Since double destruction lasts more than double the duration that it did in hard mode, getting 2 double destructions can cause a lot of issues. The second reason we suggest this strategy is the enrage time itself. As you should have seen from the DPS analysis, the minimum DPS required to beat this fight is very high. During live raid, that number will come down a bit, since you'll have dots up on the tanks during defensive systems and/or have ranged DPS, tanks, healers capable of doing damage, hitting the tanks after the adds are dead, assuming you have time to spare. At any rate, the DPS needed to push the encounter is still high enough that unless you're stacking certain classes and specs, you are almost guaranteed to see the enrage. Since the enrage in nightmare is generally survivable for 5 to 10 seconds, utilizing the third strategy will give you the best chance of surviving through enrage. As long as you're able to push Stormcaller down before the enrage, you can then stack your group inside the shield that spawns and put all DPS on Firebrand and let your tanks and melee deal with the adds inside the shield. For obvious reasons, this strategy assumes you have ranged. If you have a full melee group, you'll be forced to defeat both bosses before the enrage. Now with that said, there is a specific strategy that works really well for the healer kiting the spires, and I'm going to let our healer Angel go ahead and discuss how to do that now.
Because the DPS requirements for this fight is extremely high, it is important for the healers to try and maximize any DPS uptime they can get on the boss, as well as being able to heal the damage going out to the raid. For the healer who is in charge of kiting the spires, this task can be managed rather easily. First, position yourself to the right of Firebrand and left of the red circle. Let the first blue spire drop and move directly towards Stormcaller. Here you will stand for a few seconds until you can cleanse the yellow circle. Once cleansed, move directly forward and position yourself directly in the middle of the two bosses. You should still be able to heal both of your tanks from this position. The final blue spire will drop on you here. Once the final blue spire is dropped, immediately join your team on Firebrand to DPS and heal while waiting for the knockback. Repeat these steps until your group swaps over to Stormcaller. From there, you will just need to continually move from front to back of Stormcaller, kiting the spires until the final burn.
Alright, so through all of that, you'll need to ensure you properly handle the overcharged jetpack mechanic. The safest way to deal with this is to push the ad out of the shield either before death or immediately upon entering the shield. Generally speaking, we suggest leaving it in until near death for the melee, and pushing ads out immediately for range so they can AoE or dot spread ASAP. Either way, just make sure it does not die inside the shield. Lastly, as you start to work full-time on Stormcaller, the Incinerate Armor and Double Destruction channels will start to move off their normal sync. This means after the first Incinerate Armor you experience once you're focused on Stormcaller, you'll be unable to keep your tanks from having to swap. Make sure the DPS on the inside of Stormcaller move towards the back as your tanks transition, otherwise it can result in a cleave hitting your DPS and one-shotting them. So that's pretty much the fight, guys. I'll be honest, this is a very difficult fight, not because of mechanics, but because of the enrage time and the DPS requirements needed. This fight will more than likely push your raid team to its limits, but if you're like us, you'll enjoy every second of the challenge. So if this video helped you, feel free to pay it forward and help us by dropping us a like and subscribing. If you have any questions, suggestions, tips and tricks, or think of something I may have missed, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. So until next time, guys, take care and enjoy the fight.
Engaging hostiles for the masters! Engaging defensive systems! Engaging offensive systems!
you.